Roughly 45% of construction projects worldwide are affected by weather-related delays, leading to billions of dollars in lost revenue and additional expenses annually. Floods, high winds, and extreme temperatures can damage sites, halt work, and affect material quality, leading to project setbacks and financial losses. Knowing this, welcome to Future Risk presented by Zurich North America. We explore the changing risk and resilience landscape and share insights on challenges that face businesses to help you meet tomorrow prepared. In this episode, we're focusing our Extreme Weather podcast on the unique challenges that the construction sector faces. I'm Aroo Sivasubramaniam, head of Zurich Resilience Solutions in North America. And today, I'm speaking with Alicia Pavelko, head of Innovation and Sustainability for Construction at Zurich North America, and Doug Stohlman, head of Construction at Zurich Resilience Solutions. Alicia, Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in. When we talk about extreme weather and construction, what first pops to the top of your mind?
So for me, it's unfortunately utter devastation. If you turn on your TV, if you've looked at the push notifications on your phone, you might think that our media has become incredibly creative with their headlines. But the reality is there has been an incredible uptick in the frequency and the severity of these extreme weather events. And when you boil it down to construction is one of the most vulnerable industries that's faced day to day by these extreme weather events. There's a couple of really important aspects at play when it comes to construction. One being that you have property in the various stages of completion, so could be subject to the elements, whether you're just setting steel, whether you have a roof on a building yet. There's all kinds of different hazards to contend with from a weather standpoint at the different points in a project. Another really critical aspect for construction is that you have people working in uncontrolled environments. If you think about a manufacturing plant, you have the luxury of having a roof over your head and perhaps air conditioning and heat. But when it comes to a construction project, you're outside, most likely exposed to the elements and having to adapt day to day to whatever comes your way. And then the last part of it is everybody knows that the goals in construction is to come in on time and within budget. And so there is an incredible amount of pressure to work through it all in order to meet those schedules, to hit all of your on-time incentives, and to come in on or under budget. So oftentimes people are making risky decisions and working through extreme weather events when they probably should just be going home.
Alicia, I'd like to add a couple points if I could. So you talked a little bit about rain. This impacts concrete pours, curing times, and quality of concrete. Excavation tasks, deep excavations, you need to dry it out, adding time and delay to the projects. It makes it unsafe for workers, so creating slip, trip, and fall exposures on platforms, on ladders, on stairs. And then talked a little bit about heat. High heat increases workplace injuries. There's approximately in California 20,000 heat-related injuries, and this impacts workers' comp costs, your medical expenses, your lost time costs, and it also just lowers production. And also when you look at just the U.S. infrastructure, broader than just construction, it impacts roads and bridges and rail projects. So it's very comprehensive.
Yeah, Doug, you actually bring up some really good points because when you think about traditional natural catastrophes, you immediately think about California earthquake or Florida named storm or those high hazard floods. But what we're really talking about here is an expansion of those traditional CATs into some of these secondary nat cat perils. So just that everyday rainfall, your atmospheric rivers, your severe convective storms, tornadoes, derechos, wildfires, a whole array of additional perils that we're being faced with day in and day out in today's environment.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to also just kind of weave in wind. High winds on a construction project Stop the crane operations, both tower and mobile cranes. When you're not using cranes, you're not making money. Can you imagine being up in scaffolding when they have 25, 35 mile an hour risk? You're really at risk with wind working around construction. Tilt ups, we have a lot of tilt up construction out west here, and they require wall bracing. When it becomes windy, you have to add more bracing, or the tilt up will collapse, causing property damage. And then loose materials. If you're on a high rise and you get up to some heavy winds, as the building gets built, there's already winds that are just there, and you add another 20 mile an hour wind, you have tools and debris falling off a building. So can you imagine working on a 25-story high rise and dropping a tool or some of the debris going over? And it happens all the time. It causes employee injuries down below, and then also, a tool or debris going to the general public or through a car or through a restaurant nearby. So there's just all kinds of exposures to think about.
It's kind of funny. Construction, it's a super, super interesting industry, right? We sometimes take it for granted because, the industry's been there forever, right? But it's so complex. And then when you bring in something like extreme weather, which hits you from so many different angles, including the secondary events, as you alluded to, Alicia, this was actually one of the podcasts I was looking forward to the most because I knew there's so many different elements. Kind of funny. Last week I was on a flight, and I'll share something maybe personal with you all, right? So I know I speak a lot at work, but generally I'm an introvert, and I like to keep to myself. But I made an effort nowadays. Every time I fly, whoever I'm sitting next to, I try to strike up a conversation, right, just to be a bit more sociable and meet new people. And coincidentally, last week, the lady that was next to me, she just happened to be a construction executive, right? So the moment I mentioned, I work with Zurich Resilience Solutions and some of the things we do around extreme weather, her eyes lit up, right? And she just got so passionate about it because she was just talking about all the different effects and consequences and things they need to think about. And their company particularly focused on cement manufacturing, right? And you could imagine with heat and cold and just the science behind cement, what it does to it, right? And all things they have to take into account. And obviously, if you don't catch it well enough, once it's built, there are very significant consequences to the fixed property itself and potentially people, right? So I really love this topic, and I love the fact that you guys took in so many different directions. Alicia, you alluded to severe convective storms, right? It feels like this is a emerging terminology and topic that's probably come in the last 5 to 10 years, whereas before we didn't hear it as much. And I think it probably ties a little bit to your comments around severity and frequency. Can you explain a little bit what it is and what it means to builders and building owners?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about severe convective storms, what we're referring to are straight line winds, windstorms. We're talking about derechos, which are defined as an inland hurricane. We also couple events like hailstorms or tornadoes. All of that type of atmospheric disturbance are wrapped up into the terminology of severe convective storm. And what's really problematic about severe convective storm is this is one of those catastrophe perils that we do not traditionally model for as underwriters. Also, when you look at where these severe convective storms are happening within the United States, it's happening traditionally or most frequently throughout the central band of the United States, which again, we've traditionally considered a no cat or a low cat zone. So from an insurance company perspective, we hadn't been setting rates, deductibles, sublimits, or terms and conditions appropriately to handle this increasing exposure. There's one really interesting statistic, and that's from NOAA, and looking at the 2024 $1 billion plus weather disasters. There were 27 of them that were over $1 billion, and actually 17 of the 27 fall into the category of severe convective storm, and they took place throughout the central band of the United States. So this exposure is real. This hazard is real. I do want to illustrate, though, that there are things that we can do about it, and there are things that our customers are actively integrating into their business processes to address this heightened exposure. So one such example is solar contractors. Of course, they're building in big, open, sunny fields, often remote fields. areas that are highly prone to severe convective storm. But they're looking at building and having the most values exposed during lower hazard times of the year. They're also being really, really selective when picking the materials for the job to make sure that they do have solar panels that are the most hail resistant available on the market. They're also looking for those that have different stowing type technologies so that they can be pivoted and put into a safe place at the end of a workday or for the weekend or whatever it might be. So there are a lot of things that we can be doing and that we are doing in order to address this exposure. But again, it's real, it's out there, it's here today, and we have to address it in order for carriers to continue to provide the necessary coverage to our customers and brokers.
And Alicia, you mentioned stowing. It's really a critical defense aspect for reducing hail damage, but it takes time to put it in those positions. You just can't, if you're predicting a hail event in the next 10 minutes, you'll never get the solar panels to be in the right angle. And so you're going to cause all kinds of damage. So it really is about trying to have a holistic plan. It needs to be automated. You have to have software, AI kind of built into it. The earlier you can predict the weather event, the better outcomes you're going to have.
That's another really good point, Doug. And that kind of brings me to the different types of technology and the significant technological advances that we've seen in the market in the last 6 to 12 months. So again, you can get your weather report from your local news, or you can have a weather station on your project site and you can subscribe to or have individualized weather predictions coming to you to help you predict specifically for your job site in a little bit better accuracy than that 10-minute window that you described. So in making investments in some of these new and emerging technologies are really important. And it's a great opportunity to demonstrate to your underwriter that you are looking to improve your risk and set your risk apart from the competitors in the marketplace.
It's a interesting point, right? Because I think a lot of what you're talking about is on a day-to-day basis, and how could the site supervisors and the builders there control those risks. At the same time, if we take a step back and put ourselves in the shoes of the builder themselves as they plan things, as they allocate capital, right? We have more and more data available and tools available that helps them actually forecast, not just today, tomorrow, but also in the short term, medium term, in terms of how weather patterns are changing across the US and across the world, right? So we could see, for example, in areas which, for example, right now have very limited extreme heat exposure, but we could see in 5 to 10 years that, increasing significantly. We have pockets like that for sure, right? Likewise, wildfire and so forth. And, a business owner, a construction builder should be thinking about these things as where they want to build, and if they want to build in certain locations, what type of things do they need to take into account, right? So obviously, together with our underwriting partners, Zurich Resilience Solutions offers our Spotlight solution, which really helps with this as well, right? Where we look across many, many perils, across many different scenarios, and really can zone into very, very micro level at the site level to help owners really allocate capital better in the longer term, right? So kind of maybe a pop quiz for you guys. So do either of you know when we hired the first risk engineer within Zurich Group? Either of you know this by chance?
Probably 1950 as a guess.
Well, Alicia, what do you think? I'm curious.
I'm going to go a little earlier than that. I'm going to go 1945, closest without going over.
Honestly, I'm baffled by how well you guys answered that, because it was literally around that time, right? So it was post World War II, and when we had the economic boom and the building boom. So the reason we had it is because we had so much buildings going up, especially in New York area and so forth. And as a result, because a lot of unsafe practice, we were seeing a lot of worker injuries and, tragically worker deaths as well. So that's actually why we started bringing engineers in-house to help our customers, avoid those losses, avoid those really sad circumstances. So it reminds me, we talk about extreme heat, a lot of extreme weather events. What are some of the things, we customers should be thinking about and be proactively addressing when it comes to protecting employees? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, workers, so forth.
I'll answer that, Aroo. There's all kinds of technology out there for the worker. So, wearables, I'll just go through a few examples with the wearables. The wearables now are so sophisticated, they're either on Wi-Fi or cellular or other, but you can check the vital signs of your workers, the heart rate, your body
Yeah.
temperature. The body temperature is real critical. If you're working in Arizona, you can get overheated real quick, but knowing the core temperature is really impactful to say, hey, I just got an alert that Doug's body temperature's reached its max. That person needs to take a break and go into like a cooling station. And just fluid loss. The hydration is so key when you're working outside. You could have somebody come in over the weekend just not hydrated for one reason or another, and then they're going to start working in the heat already at a point with lack of hydration. And so you need to have that person now really hydrate to get back to the baseline. So all of these sensors and wearables monitor this. Worker fatigue, there's sensors out there that monitor that. If a worker gets hot, they get tired. And when workers get tired, there's accidents. And these wearables also are so sophisticated now, they can predict a lightning storm, a tornado, a temperature change, a rain event, and wind. And so a lot of technology has come a long ways for all our contractors to adopt.
That's super cool. And, recently I was at a construction site with one of your team members, Doug, and, I remember one of the suppliers came by sharing the new helmets with cooling systems and so forth,
Yeah.
right? The smile on the workers' faces were, amazing. It was a relief to them. It was a very hot day in Chicago, so you can imagine.
Sure. Yeah, and they also have cooling tents. Those are real popular. Cooling tents are not just a pop-up tent like you would think about. It's
Yeah.
really an enclosed tent that has air conditioning. It has water and ice and food and a table you can take a break. There's a lot to be built in to avoid some of the high-risk weather events such as heat that we have today.
Yeah.
Hey,
No,
Doug,
that's-
I've been hearing a little bit about some changing legislation from a federal level, also state and then local from OSHA with respect to heat standards, trying to get some more stringent protocol in place
Sure.
to protect workers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So federal OSHA has a heat and illness regulation. So all states have to adhere to it. So I live in California. California always goes above and beyond, but at a minimum, each state has to adhere to that. So it requires them to monitor the temperature outside. There's two triggers involved with it. So once the temperature gets 80 degrees, that's the first trigger for the worker. So the project now has to provide cool drinking water, ice, cool down areas, as Aroo was talking about, shade tents and fans. That's kind of the entry level point of cooling off workers. And they could have misting fans as well. Then once it gets to over 90 degrees, that's kind of a bigger trigger. And now you're talking about mandatory 15-minute rest breaks every 2 hours and observation systems to monitor heat and illness on site. And you have to have an emergency response plan. What happens if somebody has a heat stroke? You have to know what to do. What are the signs of a heat stroke? And contractors must train the employees on all of these standards and risk factors and also the symptoms. So that buddy effect that you look at your coworker and they don't look good. And so now you have to identify the signs of heat stress. And all these OSHA standards impact all the contractors. You need more resources. You need more, programs and oversight at each one of these projects during the summer months.
Very interesting. I'm curious, right? So we're talking a lot about extreme weather. Obviously, it's evolving, it's dramatic, we know it, right? At the same time, our customers are evolving, builders are evolving, and so forth. They're not just looking at the build itself for success, but they're also looking at the completion of it and how that succeeds, right? So can you talk a little bit about what that means? And also from that point of view, when it comes to extreme weather, what should the builders and customers be thinking about there?
I'd love to address this one from my perspective. It's really neat, the transition that we've seen from our customers. So where a contractor at one point in time just said, hey, I'm going to build this asset as quickly and inexpensively as I can. I'm going to turn it over to the owner and I'm going to get out of there. Those days seem to be over. Yeah. We see our contractors, our owners really collaborating and thinking together about the sustainability of the asset, of the community in which they're building that asset, and the longevity of the asset. We even see some go as far as thinking about the lifespan of the asset and planning at the time of build how they're going to decommission it at the end of the life. So once again, we see a lot of integrated planning with the owner's fixed property carrier, and thinking about how do we pick the right materials that are resilient to climate risk today, but then perhaps in 10 years or in 30 years, based on some of the anticipated climate change models, how do we make sure that the actions we're taking today will prepare us to be successful in the future? So seeing that planning, seeing that thoughtfulness has been a really, really neat kind of transformation in the marketplace and in the environment.
Yeah, and I could add to that too, Alicia. You're right. You have to integrate these protections in the design phases and as you build. And during these weather events, you have to build in temporary structures, enclosures. When it snows, rains, or gets wind, where does material go? Covering it up with plastic sheeting or tarp, that's a minimum thing you can do. If you can bring it inside, all the better. And the equipment is so expensive, and you got, thousands and thousands of dollars sitting there in equipment and materials that need to be covered up and hopefully inside during these extreme weather events. Also, you have to plan for roads. You need to have drainage at the project. You need to have backup systems, and maybe you need swales and all kinds of things. You have to provide pumps for below grade excavations, a basement, a garage, anything below grade needs to have some sort of temporary water to be able to be pumped out. So there's a lot that needs to be integrated into the design and the owner side and the contractor side.
Cool. No, very interesting. And it's always amazing to see that evolution with our customers, and naturally it leads to better, right? I'm curious, it feels like we've been talking a lot about all the changes and some of the, let's say, downsides of it, but I know, Alicia, Doug, both of your teams are working really hard to also help customers have solutions. So in general terms, can you talk a little bit about what Zurich is doing to help customers best prepare for extreme weather?
I can take a few key aspects. You have to have a very aggressive, robust risk mitigation plan. It needs to be automated, needs to be very comprehensive, from start to finish. You don't start a risk mitigation plan halfway through the project. You need to look at it early on during the pre-project planning aspects of it. So it really has to be well thought out and then well integrated throughout the project. Also, as you kind of go through and do your assessments at the project level, there's always room to improve. You're seeing various trends that are going on. You need to kind of adjust those plans to that specific project based on those weather events. So in my opinion, really at the end, it is reducing weather delays, property damage, and then keeping our workers safe.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to some of the things that Doug mentioned. So from an underwriting perspective, we want to know and we want to hear about all of those pre-test plans that you have put into place to deal with the climate risk or the extreme weather risk that you may face on your project. So best practice would be to integrate that as part of your submission when you're submitting your project to your carrier. Don't wait for your underwriter to ask. Go ahead and be proactive with that information. Show that you know what the risk is and that you're proactively addressing it. Another thing that's really neat that's come out of this emerging trends, these emerging risks, is product development. So at Zurich, we heard from our customers and brokers that they were having a lot of delays triggered by just everyday weather events. So, it just kind of was rainy, too rainy to work, or it was too windy to set steel, and it was triggering a delay in the completion of the project. But it didn't actually cause any physical loss or damage, which is a traditional trigger for a property or a builder's risk insurance policy. So that led to the development of a construction weather parametric product that we're now offering at Zurich. So again, these new hazards that we're facing has led to some really unique and thoughtful product development and different ways to transfer that financial risk from the contractor back over to the carrier. So really need to see these evolve, again, as we're faced with different hazards day in and day out.
I know there's a lot of excitement about the parametric solution and certainly for extreme weather, that screams like natural fit, right?
So Aroo, if I could, I'd just like to maybe add something to Alicia's point.
Please.
Scheduling is really key to all of this. And we're fortunate not to have too many losses with that product, but you have to build some flexibility into the project schedule. And it's really key that you build in alternative work plans. And what I mean by that is, when are you going to work inside? That needs to be planned. You do start working inside during January and December. You have to sort of plan for that. You don't want to be caught outside during the winter. And can you do offsite work? Can you do anything with prefab during those months where you have a lot of rain and wind events that maybe make the project inhabitable for doing work?
Thanks, Doug. We should definitely talk about some of the extreme weather solutions we have on the engineering side too, right? So in addition to planning, there is the climate spotlight tool we offer, right? It is for builders, contractors, designers to really understand at a very granular level various different exposures they might have today and 5 years from now onwards, right? Sometimes we think extreme weather is 50 years down the road, but you open up a newspaper, literally every day there seems to be one event somewhere just in the US alone. And then of course there's Canada and the whole globe, right? So we really need to understand that. I feel like customers, they're learning more and more, but it's here today. And I feel like that's the one part that we need to help our customers understand. And as a result of it, plan their project, allocate their capital appropriately, and to really be successful themselves, right? Alicia, Doug, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for listening. If you like the show, leave a comment or review wherever you get your favorite podcast, or drop us a note at media@zurichna.com. Stay tuned for our next episode of our Extreme Weather mini-series, where we talk to Adam Aronson, founder and CEO of Aerosite, about top extreme weather risks the C-suite leaders and investors need to know. This has been the Future Risk presented by Zurich North America. Thank you.
Future of Risk, presented by Zurich North America. If you like the show, we'd appreciate it if you left a comment or review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Let us know what you think at media@zurichna.com and join us next week.
The information in this audio recording was compiled from sources believed to be reliable for general information purposes and is intended for Zurich clients and business partners. The information contained here may be useful to you or your enterprise when developing your own policies and procedures. The policies and procedures applicable to your enterprise should take into account the specific circumstances of your business and business environment, which is beyond the capacity of this podcast. Any and all information provided is not intended to constitute advice of any nature and is specifically not legal advice, and accordingly, you should consult with your own legal counsel. We do not guarantee the accuracy of this information presented or any results, and further assume no liability in connection with this recording and the information provided therein. Moreover, Zurich reminds you that the information provided cannot be assumed to contain every acceptable safety and compliance procedure, or that additional procedures might not be appropriate under the circumstances. The subject matter of this recording is not tied to any specific insurance product, nor will adopting these policies and procedures ensure coverage under any insurance policy. We encourage listeners to seek additional information from credible sources. Thank you.